Hello, aspirants. Welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm Harpreet Singh, the daily analysis of the Hindu from 23rd of December 2024. Let's begin with today's analysis. This is the QR code where you can basically find this particular PDF along with other material that is required for your preparation. Total topics we have taken from today's The Hindu newspaper for the analysis. We have the Manrega scheme. Then we have global warming challenge. That was an important article in the editorial. Next, we have Operation Sankalp, then Pegasus spyware, urinary tract infection that is on a rise according to the recent reports. And then we have the Belgaum session. Let's see and analyze all these statements. First, main topics. Half of Manrega sites inspected in West Bengal showed flaws, RTI reply. Now see, in order to understand this is one of the problems. It is not only in the state of Bengal, it is also present in various other states along with the other problems that the scheme we come across when we are studying this scheme. So important for us is that we study what Manrega is and then along with it the challenges that it is basically facing. Let's analyze that. So what is Manrega? Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It is a landmark social security scheme launched by the Government of India to ensure the right to work to the rural households. It was established, or let us say, came into force in 2005. The scheme provides unskilled, please remember, every word over here becomes important because in the preliminary examination also, the word can be used or let us say replaced by unskilled to skilled, and that is why please remember these words are very, very important. Unskilled manual work to promote livelihood security, reduce poverty, and improve the rural infrastructure. Now, please understand, this becomes crucial for the UPSC aspirant for a major reason that Manrega since 2005 has been asked directly or indirectly in the prelims and the mains examinations repeatedly. Especially when the programs with respect to rural development also come, it can be asked, what is the role of Manrega with respect to the rural development, role of Manrega and the women association with that, role of Manrega with respect to rural upliftment or poverty elevation. These things can come very well. So that is why it becomes very, very important for you. Okay. What is Manrega scheme? Now, please see. Manrega is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Initially, when it came, it scheme guaranteed at least 100 days of paid employment per year to every rural household willing to do unskilled manual labor. Now, it is a guarantee to every rural household that from the side of the government that you will be given at least 100 days of guarantee with respect to the unskilled manual labor, right? So it aims to boost the rural livelihood. Now, for the people who, let us assume that small farmers, they have sown certain, let us say, crops, and during that time they do not have any other work, so they can indulge in Manrega work also. And specifically those who are, let us say, landless laborers, do not have any land, very poor also, they can also work over here. Now please understand, when we talk about the Manrega rate, you get a rate that is fixed by the government also with respect to every day of work. Now this becomes important. Why? Please understand, according to the recent report that was basically published by Down to Earth, in India, and farmers in various parts of India are earning merely 27 rupees per day. Now, in today's time, when the inflation is so high, it becomes, or if when we see 27 rupees, we see the condition that they might be experiencing. That is why many of them are even indulging in Manrega work so that at least they can survive or eat something by the money that they get from this work. That is why over there, scheme like Manrega has been or playing a very important role in poverty elevation and at least a means of sustenance to a large number of people who are living in the rural regions. Now see, to boost rural livelihood, to improve infrastructure, to create sustainable assets, ultimately enhancing the economic stability in the areas. The scheme also aims to reduce the rural migration from rural to urban areas, because see, why? All these things are related to something that you're getting income from. When you're getting income from the scheme by the unskilled manual labor you're doing, that will again prevent the people from migrating from the rural region to urban area in search of work. And that is why this has been a very effective scheme. So let us see the other aspects also. Now this is in a tabular form, which basically gives you a view what the scheme is. Now this becomes important from the prelims perspective also for that matter. Full form, we know Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Official launch date 2nd February 2006. Act passed on 23rd August 2005. So remember that the act was passed in 2005, but official date launch was 2006. Former name before that, there was another scheme that was there, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, and on this was built the concept of Manrega. Now please understand difference between them. Manregas is a scheme based on the Manrega Act. Number of district covered 708 district as per the 11th February 2021. Stakeholders. So large number of people are stakeholders with respect to this particular scheme. The wage seekers, Gram Sabhas, Panchayati Raj institution, block level program officer, district program coordinator, state government, Ministry of Rural Development, that is the ministry from the central government, civil society, self-help groups, and all are participating in a very important dimension over here. You have the Manrega job card also over here, a document that entitles a worker to work under the Manrega scheme. The mandate, provision of at least 100 days of work guaranteed in the financial year. Now, these are the details that you should be knowing because it becomes important for your examination. Now, please understand what is the eligibility criteria if you want to work under the Manrega scheme. See, to apply for a Manrega job card, candidate must fulfill the eligibility. What is the eligibility? Residency must be a resident of a rural area first. Age must be at least 18 years old. Third, willingness for a manual work must be willing to engage in unskilled manual labor. Now, in many cases, people might be assuming that in your prelims examination, it might be coming a person who is in the urban region can do Manrega work. Now, see, one of the eligibility given by the government is must be a resident. That times he is residing in a rural region. That is what is important. So please understand these three statements become important that they can be asked as statements in the prelims examination. How many days of work? We have already seen that at least 100 days of work in a financial year. In certain states, under specific circumstances, it can be extended to 150 days also to support the rural farm crisis. Now, key features, understand what are the dimensions associated. Legal right to work, because it is a statutory act, and an act because passed by a law. So that means a legal right has been given for you to work, right? Because it is guaranteed from the side of the government. Next, income support, because you get a minimum support system, a minimum wage under this particular scheme. Sustainable development creates assets like roads, ponds, irrigation facilities, contributing to the rural infrastructure to the work that is done under the Manrega scheme. Women empowerment, we realize that there is again prioritization of the women under this particular scheme. So that means women can also engage, and again it contributes to women empowerment. Transparency implements a social audits also, and along with it we realize that effective use of the technology has been made under this scheme, so it increases the transparency under the scheme. So let's move ahead. Challenges. What are the challenges that this scheme basically experiences? See, the government reduces the allocation by 30% for the scheme in the union budget from fiscal year 2023 to 24. So the budget allocation for Manrega scheme has been reduced. Now that is again a point of concern also, because large number of instances where the delay in the payments have been observed. In that, when the allocation reduces, particularly when we see the inflation rising, we see the farm crisis taking place, we realize that allocation decreasing is again something that will later on create a problem with respect to the jobs that are being provided through under the Manrega schemes, under the 100 days guarantee. So that is why this is also a point of concern. There is no evidence that Aadhaar-based payment neither reduce the corruption nor reduce the wage payment delays. This is again an important thing. Please understand there was a case in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh also, both cases, where in spite of the digital technology being there for respect to the payments that are provided to the workers over here, what happens generally is the people who are working in the rural areas and their fingerprints are being used in order to authenticate the payments. So what happens is, because of the rural work they're doing, the fingerprints are almost just are not properly detectable by the machines. And then what happens is, because of that, they're not able to get the payments, so they have been working. So we realize that technology integration over here has been good in a way, but also led to a lot of crisis among the various families in instances like these. Because of the rural work, the fingerprint is not correctly detectable, you are not going to get the payments also. And that is what creates a problematic scenario. Delay and insufficiency in the fund dispersal. Most states have failed to disperse the wage within the 15 days as mandated by Manrega. In addition, workers are not compensated for the delay in the wages. Next, this has turned the scheme into a supply side program, and subsequently the workers had begun to lose interest in working under it. Next, along with this ineffective role of the Panchayati Raj institutions. With very little autonomy, the Gram Panchayats are not able to implement this act in an effective manner because the control again comes under the control of the district magistrate and then the state government. So when the PRIs are not basically empowered, they're not able to coordinate with respect to the Manrega work properly, and then that leads to a lot of gaps in the implementation of the scheme. Next is large number of incomplete work. There have been delays in the completion of work under Manrega. Inspection of the projects have been irregular. So what happens is that we over here are focusing on 100 days work, right? In cases 150 also. Over here, we realize that it is more focused on, let us say, giving job to in the form of unskilled manual labor to the people. But when we are talking about the work they are doing, we also know that again assets are created. Let us say we are integrating Manrega with Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana or certain irrigation programs. Under that, we are integrating it. But to what extent are they being completed? Because the labor that comes, let us say they come for 100 days when they are free. Let us say small farmers also, but after that they leave. Then we have deficit of labor, and the projects that were done are incomplete. And then by the next season, again, what happens? The construction that was done is of no use right now because it is not completed. So it is again a waste of money also that happens. That is again a problematic scenario. Fabrication of job cards. We realize that a lot of recently fabrication of job cards, duplication of job cards have been done in order to, this basically led to a lot of corruption scandals also. So this is again a major issue. The scheme has not transcended into creating more useful assets beyond the road and irrigation canals. That is very true because the primary focus, or we see what is visible, is in the form of Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana and certain irrigation schemes. Under that, certain small irrigation canals have been constructed. But more than that, if you realize, no effective implementation of the scheme in the other rural development regions have been observed. And that is also a point of concern also, that if you want to develop the rural areas, a comprehensive and holistic development is what is required, not only specific 2 or 3 sectors. That is again a problematic situation with respect to Manrega. Next, global warming fight as a challenge for India. Please understand, over here I have marked 1, 2, 3 various points over here, which are we going to deal right now when we are going to analyze this. Now this talks about global warming, and this talks about that whatever is happening recently or of late in the international sphere also, that is basically going to create challenges for India. Let us see what they're talking and analyze that. See, if I want to study what is global warming, please understand that we have studied this right from the school days also. So when I talk about global warming, we know that it refers to a long-term rise in the Earth's surface temperature since the pre-industrial era, primarily due to the human activities like burning of the fossil fuels. Now we realize that increasing greenhouse gas in the atmosphere contributes to a lot of climate change, and which is widely recognized as severe threat to both life and economy. Now you realize that because of the rising temperature, we realize that it is leading to a lot of problems. Let us say a large number of cyclones coming because the temperature of the oceans are rising. Along with it, do you realize that the cities, the regions where we used to experience, like let's take an example of Dehradun. You will be, if I go back 20 years back, you did not even require air conditioning even during the summer days. Now, the temperature is soaring to 42 degrees Celsius. Can you imagine? Now, what is going on? That is basically a representation of the rising temperature across the country. Along with it, the whole Earth. We realize extremes of climate that is taking place. We realize that a lot of disasters are rising. We are realizing that the Arctic's, the ice over there are completely melting. In a few decades, let us say by 2050 or 2060, we'll be seeing a complete ocean over there. So what is going on? This is again one of the factors that is basically an outcome of the rise in the global temperature. And greenhouse effect is an outcome, and global warming is basically, when we realize that, is a representation of that. Now what we see is global warming itself is showing you that globally there is a warming effect that is taking place in the whole planet, and that is leading to a lot of problem, and majorly what we see is associated with the dimension of the climate change, right? Because Earth behaves like a greenhouse. The greenhouse effect is there. That is again contributing a lot of problem. Now please see, What are the challenges? Now, this is very interesting. Now, please understand, recently, few months back, conference of parties took place at Baku, right? COP under what? Under UNFCCC. We realize that why this becomes important is that the developing over here, this was very important because COP29 had to deal with it was coined as something related to the climate finance this time. Why? Because in COP29, the decision with respect to the decision with respect to with respect to contribution from the side of the developed countries to the developing countries had to be decided. Now, see what happens is even in Copenhagen, also in 2009, we realized that the developed countries had committed to $100 billion per annum, so that that amount would be given to the developing countries so that they can move towards a transition towards more greener energy and move away from the fossil fuel, that is non-green sources of energy generation. And for that matter, even all forms of greener energy generation and mechanism that are used should be green, so that overall the climate change, the experience that we are experiencing across the world actually reduces, the severity reduces. Now, over here, that 2009 commitment that was made by the developed countries was never fulfilled. So what happens is that repeatedly meetings took place, and finally we were at COP29, Conference of Parties, the annual 29th meeting under the UNFCCC. Over there, they decided, see, if the developed countries want that the developing countries should also transition towards those means through which the energy generation is clean, and that would require a lot of investment. And that is why they said, you need to give us money also for that so that we can transition, because you don't have that much money. And you realize that a country like India also, which has an abundance of coal resources, and if you want to transition towards greener energy, that becomes expensive. You need to give the money to the developing countries. So what the expectation was, please understand. The expectation of developing nations was, and what they got. Now please see here. The expected valuation what the developed countries would be giving them according to was close to 5 to 6.5 trillion dollars per annum. What the developing countries basically got? $300 billion per annum, and that also again will depend upon the whims and fancies of the developed countries also, whether they provide or not. Now, this tremendous reduction in the funding from the side of the developed countries is also a challenge to countries like India, for that matter, to move towards a greener energy source or technology. Now, this is one of the major challenges that we see first. Next, net zero emission. Now, this is a very interesting topic that basically we come across. Net zero emission, what this concept is. Please understand. To put it simply, net zero basically refers to a balance between the amount of greenhouse gases that are produced. That is a balance. On the one side, the amount of greenhouse gases that are produced and the amount that is removed from the atmosphere. Now, amount that is produced and the amount that is removed, so that a balance comes into being. So how it is basically done is, please understand, it is achieved through a combination of, one is emission reduction and next is emission removal. So both are the means through which this can be done. Either you reduce the emission or then you remove the emission that is present. So the concept of net zero emission becomes very tricky over here because large number of developed countries and many countries have focused and committed that they will be achieving this by 2030, right? So a lot of targets have been there, targets by various countries. Is by 2030. But now we realize that countries like even India and China are basically talking about close to 2070 that they'll be achieving this. Now see, this becomes automatically very clear also because by 2070 we realize that why this is a delay, because see, we are developing countries, though China is again much more developed than India. But if you see from the aspect that we are developing, the requirement of energy is too high, and right now the funding that is given by the developed countries is very less. And we have abundance of coal reserves also that we need to use, because see, when the developed countries during their time of industrialization, they had produced the massive amount of emissions, which now even the world is suffering because of which. So India is of the opinion that for us to achieve net zero, we need time. And constraints that the funding already not being there, and you want us to achieve by 2030 something not possible. So a lot of pressure that comes with respect to net zero emission is also what India is experiencing right now, because the developed countries are saying that you need to achieve the net zero emission goal because it is important for the global climate change, and that is taking place at a very rapid rate. And India is very stern and firm on its stand that, see, we have decided that this is going to be achieved by 2070, not earlier than that. Might take some time also after that, but this is what the goal India has or kept in mind. This international pressure that comes over here is also very interesting over here, because the developed countries do pressurize countries like India and China for the reason that they are the ones who are emitting. But if you realize the emissions, the contribution made by United States, again, it is one of the major contributory. But the pressure that is exerted is on countries like India and China. So that is again one of the pressures that India experiences. Next is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism 2026. We realize we've discussed this also. Now this is something that is going to be implemented by the European Union. Let us understand in a very simple terms. Let us assume that, let me explain it in simple words. What happens is, supposing that this is a company C1 in Europe, in let us say, E1. Now E1 is a company in European Union, let us say. Okay. Now there's another company, let us say I1, a company, let us say Iron and Steel Company in India. And this is, let us say, E1 is a company in European Union producing iron and steel, let us assume. Now what is here is, now you please understand that the energy that is generated by E1 for producing iron and steel has transitioned or are in the process of transitioning or almost transitioned towards greener energy. Now what is going on is that E1 is using green energy, let us say clean energy or clean fuel, or let us say green energy, right? Now on the other hand, if you see here, you will be realizing that I1 right now, let us say in India, is using what? Coal as the primary source for producing the iron and steel. So what is using? It's using coal as a means of energy, right? Now we know that very well that coal is non-clean, or it is not clean. Now what happens because of this is, because the E1 is using cleaner fuel, the amount of energy that has, the amount of money that has been spent by E1 is much more, because to transition from a source of energy like coal to a greener energy, it takes a lot of investment. So now because of this, what is going on? Cost of production will rise. On the other hand, if you see here, because it is non-clean and coal is relatively cheaper, so cost of production is already less. Cost of production is less. Now what happens over here, please understand that. Now what European Union says is carbon border adjustment mechanism, because I1 as a company which basically produced a product, let us say steel, raw material for another companies, has produced one product from that manufacturing plant, is producing it using non-clean sources first, and the cost of production is going to be less also because it is using those coal and other means. On the other hand, over here, firstly, it is producing let us say steel, which is going to be expensive also because it has transitioned towards green energy. So what it says is, now European Union, like a bloc, is pressurizing other countries to move towards green energy. And why? Because their companies had moved towards greener energy as a source of energy. So that required a lot of investment. Now, if this iron, or let us say steel, is imported into European Union, under normal circumstances, what would have happened? That the European Union, even let us say the companies would become again, would suffer because their products are cheaper. So what happens? Under normal circumstances, under normal circumstances, what is the steel from I1 is cheaper than E1. Why? Because it is using the sources of energy is again coal cheaper, and along with it, it does not transition in the technology towards green energy. So that means that investment is not made. Now what is going on? Now, under the carbon border adjustment mechanism, tax would be imposed on I1 due to use of non-clean energy. Now, what does this lead to? This will lead to the products of I1, that is steel, become very expensive. Now, when it enters this market, the products of E1 will be cheaper, and that means they will benefit, not this. So what will happen? This will hamper the exports with respect to India, just using that, because you're using non-clean energy. That means we will impose tax on you. Now, this is again, though, again, why it is not being questioned also by various international players also. Reason, because they are using a clause with respect to United Nations framework on the climate change, convention on the climate change, because they are showing it in a perspective that, see, we are promoting cleaner energy, and because of that we are imposing these adjustment mechanisms or taxes on the other countries which are using non-clean means. That is why we realize that is a very tricky thing that the European Union has done, and that creates a lot of ripple effect and issues also. And that is why India will suffer, because right now we know that we cannot immediately transition towards all forms of greener energy. That is not possible right now. If we want to move towards electrified vehicles also, right now it is very expensive. The reason behind, the technology is expensive, the batteries are expensive, and third thing is that to produce a certain amount of electricity, we are again producing using the thermal energy. And that itself becomes expensive, and the more amount of energy the large amount of energy is required. Along with it, a lot of emissions arise because of that. So this is again a problematic scenario. Let's move ahead. Emission peaking. Please understand, peaking over here means, when are the emissions going to peak? Max. Please understand, we need to understand over here that lot of statistics, lot of data analysis has been done by people, and lot of reports giving various figures have been there. If I see certain dimension, please understand, according to Government of India, one report becomes very important over here. They said that The coal production and consumption. The coal production and consumption in India will peak around 2035 to 2042. Now just imagine that India is very categorical about that the amount of production or the coal which will take place in India and the amount of emissions and the consumption also will take place will rise from 2035 to 2042. We need to analyze that right now 42% of the electricity generated is from from the renewable energy resources. Renewable, that is clear. But do you realize that the contribution has risen because the amount of generation of electricity is risen, but the amount of thermal energy that is generated from the coal has also risen. That is also rising at a very exponential rate. Over here becomes important is that if the production and consumption is going to rise in this period, the emissions are also going to rise. And we know that this will go on rising till 2060 also, and we along with it we realize that other renewable energy sources will also rise. So we have to understand that this is again a challenge, because when we are giving these statistics officially also, it is a possibility that this is given a mild figure. There's a possibility that we go until 2050 or 60 also. Possible. Now that is why if you talk about peak emissions, India will experience those peak emissions overall around 2040 or 2050. And then probably because the other sources of energy will also be there and slowly decrease, and we'll achieve a target by 2070 as has been given by the government of India also. Now this poses a challenge with respect to what? The climate change aspect, because it is going to rise. That is what is being questioned by various international players and the Western world also. Next is low nuclear energy. Now there's a problem over here. See, the article or the editorial that mentions at the last is that, see, if you talk about the renewable energy, again, we know that there are a lot of issues associated with nuclear energy because of the waste that is generated. But overall, we realize the emissions that are created are not as hazardous as the other fossil fuels. So in India right now, the problematic situation is that when we started focusing on the nuclear energy, our focus was that this is the future. But now we realize that only 3% contribution is made by the nuclear energy, and that is what is problematic. We need to enhance the capacity to produce energy from the nuclear energy also. And that is something, because not being able to achieve is also creating effect with respect to the fossil fuel being used more and challenging the climate change. So these are all the points that have been basically discussed in this article that we have basically made you understand over here. So this was the analysis from the mains aspect. Let's move ahead. Mains question of the day. Write a note on the provisions of Manrega and what are the challenges that it is facing. And this is a question for you. 15 marker. It can be asked in GS2 also and GS3 also. Next, prelims topics. Now, there was an article also, and it mentions about Operation Sankalp, topic 4. Let's see what it is. Operation Sankalp is launched. Indian Navy has launched Operation Sankalp in the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, as a measure to assure safety and security of the Indian vessels following the recent maritime accidents in the region. Now, please see, the operation has been launched in the wake of the escalating tensions in the Gulf of Oman, where 2 oil tankers were attacked recently, and the US considers Iran responsible for the attacks and the heightening tension between the two countries. Now, the Indian Navy ships Chennai and Sunyana have been deployed in the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf to undertake the maritime security operations. In addition, aerial surveillance by Indian Navy. So this is again with respect to what it is to assure the safety and security of the Indian vessels. The Operation Sankalp has been launched. This is a map, the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, that you should be having little idea, because this can be asked in your prelims as 1 or 2 statements. Next is Pegasus spyware, a very interesting software that has been into news of late. Now, what it is, you should have a brief idea. See, the Pegasus spyware is a highly invasive mobile surveillance tool that is basically that can infiltrate your phone and get the person who's using it can get all the information with respect to what is present in your phone, your messages, your calls, your call record, photographs, everything. So this Pegasus spyware is highly invasive mobile surveillance tool that can secretly infiltrate and monitor smartphones, collecting data and information from the various apps and sources. So again, it is a very high-tech level spyware that basically gets all the information from the phone, in which it is basically in which if it is inside any phone, it can track anything, get any data from that particular phone. It was developed by Israeli cyber intelligence firm NSO Group, which claims to sell only to the government agencies for fighting crime and terrorism. Now, Israel's cyber intelligence firm says that you only the governments of the various countries can basically buy it from Israel, because in order to find crime and cyber problems or terrorism, this software can be of a lot of use to them. So it doesn't sell to any private bodies, but only to governments. So next, NSO emphasizes mechanism in place to avoid targeting journalists, lawyers, and human rights defenders not involved in terror or serious crimes. But what the issue arises is that if it is used against journalists or other people also, you never know. So that is what creates certain problems also. What is the operating procedure? Pegasus uses zero-click method to infect devices. I will tell you what it is zero-click. Please understand, to infect, it is malicious software that allows spyware to be installed on a device without device owner's consent. We'll understand this. First, see this. The spyware doesn't necessitate any user action for installation, distinguishing it from the regular app that requires explicit user confirmation. It can exploit vulnerabilities in apps like WhatsApp, iMessage, FaceTime, and send messages or calls to trigger the installation. So please understand what it means. Unlike the other cyber crimes issues where they might send you some message where you click on it and then you permit it and then anything can be hacked. Those are something which people are getting aware also. This is one software which even without your clicking also, let us say a person who wants to, let us say, install Pegasus in your software, you might receive a call, and even by that call merely, installation can be done. So it is a very high-tech software that is unparalleled right now. And that is why without the permission of the owner of the mobile, it is installed. Why I said without the permission? Because see, sometimes you'll be having that someone wants to take information from your phone, they might send you some fake messages that you have won a lottery, click on this. When you click on it, then they say, put your, you are giving the permission to access this, this or that, and then you click it. That means certain authentication is given. And that installs the software. But in this case, without any click or anything, it can directly be installed. And that is why it is very, very dangerous. And that is why it is the questions are being raised with respect to its use and misuse. So targets, several investigations and reports have revealed that Pegasus spyware has been used by journalists, human rights activists, lawyers, opposition leaders, and head of the states. Various countries have been said that they might be using Mexico, Morocco, Hungary, Azerbaijan, Rwanda, Saudi Arabia. So various countries have been said that they might be using it. Again, it depends. Countries who are being targeted that they are using, they say, no, we are not using. So a lot of issues are there. But again, this software itself is very dangerous, because it can be misused against citizens, against journalists, against people. So that is why an effective investigation with respect to such software should be there, and certain restrictions should be imposed on its misuse. Okay, challenges. Pegasus spyware is difficult to detect and remove as it hides its presence and activity and can self-destruct. So what happens is, unlike a software which is present in your, which sometimes comes into your phone, when let us say cybercrime unit is investigating it, it can find that there is some malware there. You can detect it. But this is one software which can destroy itself in such a way that it cannot be detected also. That is why it becomes very difficult to trace it. Next, Pegasus software is difficult to regulate and control due to the operations in the legal gray area. The NSO group and its clients commonly deny or evade the responsibility. The NSO group and the countries using it, the governments using it, say, we're not using it. So that is again the challenge. Let's move ahead. 1 in 3 women gets urinary tract infection before turning 25. So this is something very common. Please understand, this is a urinary system with respect to the male. Okay, the kidneys, ureter, bladder, prostate, and the urethra. In this case is again female kidneys, urethra, bladder, and urethra. So this is a female and the male. Now what is urinary tract infection? It is an infection in any part of the urinary system. Any part, please remember. The urinary system includes the kidneys, ureter, the bladder, and the urethra, as we have seen in the diagram also. The most commonly involved lower urinary tract are the bladder and the urethra. So remember, when I talk about UTI, It is not necessary in one part. It can be in the kidneys, it can be in the ureter, it can be in the bladder, it can be urethra, but the more common ones are in the bladder and the urethra. Women are at greater risk of developing UTI than the men. If any infection is limited to the bladder, it can be painful and annoying, but serious problems can result in UTI that is spreading to the kidneys also. Now, please understand, UTIs don't always cause symptoms, but they might include the following. So if anybody of you have experienced any form of urinary tract infection, you might have experienced some, any, or none of these symptoms depending upon the scenario, but these can be seen. A strong urge to urinate that doesn't go away, burning feeling when urinating, urinating often and passing small amounts of urine, urine that looks cloudy, urine that appears red, bright, pink colored, or Coca-Cola colored, or even blood in the urine, strong smelling urine, pelvic pain in women, especially in the center of the pelvis around the area of the pubic bone. So this is again some of the symptoms that you should be aware of. Next is 150 MPs invited in the bicentenary Coorg Belgaum session, the 100th anniversary of the Belgaum session in 1924. So please understand, 39th session of Belgaum in 1924 took place, right? Now please understand, this is one of the unique ones because this is the only session in the Congress session where it was presided by Mahatma Gandhi. So Mahatma Gandhi was the president of this Congress session. Along with it, chairman of the reception committee, Gangadhar Rao Deshpande, General Secretaries Sahib Qureshi, B.F. Barucha, Jawaharlal Nehru, and delegates that attended were 1,844. Now, please understand, a lot of agreements basically came and were decided over here. This became important majorly because it was the only session where Gandhiji was a president. And that is why it becomes important. Now, see, over here, Gandhi Das Nehru agreement was passed by All India Congress Committee in November, was ratified. Now, please understand what was this. See, Gandhi Das Nehru agreement, what was it? To end the infighting between the Congress, a pact was signed between Gandhiji on one hand and Motilal Nehru and C.R. Das on the other, whereby the Congress accepted that Swarajists were in the council of the Congress behalf, and in turn the Swarajists agreed that only those who spun khadi could be members of the Congress. So this was the Gandhi-Nehru-Das Pact. You should be aware of that. Now, this was basically agreed and passed. In this particular session, Congress franchisees were likewise altered. Resolution on untouchability and Vaikam Satyagrah were there. The Akali movement, drink and opium traffic dealt with the suitable resolutions. The exodus of the Hindus from the Kohat region was deported, and the Muslims of Kohat were exhorted to assure that the Hindus were given full protection in that region, right? And their properties and the religion and their lives were basically protected also. And then after that, we realized that sympathy was expressed for the sufferers in Gulbarga in the Nizam's dominion. Indians abroad, subject of suitable resolutions, services of Sarojini Naidu, Vaze, and Banarsi Das Chaturvedi were appreciated, and certain alteration in the Congress constitution took place. So again, what is important over here? A lot of small things have happened. Majorly is Gandhiji being the president. Second is Gandhi Das and Nehru Pact was agreed. And along with it, exodus with respect to protection of the Hindus from the Kohat region was basically discussed, and assurance was taken from the Muslim community also that they need to protect the Hindu community. That was basically observed over here, right? Let's move ahead. So multiple choice questions. Question 1 with options. Answer. Question 2. Options. Answer. Question 3. Options. Answer. Question 4. Options. Answer. Question 5. Options. Answer. So this was the analysis of the Hindu from today's newspaper. Hope you liked it and enjoyed it. We'll be continuing with the session tomorrow also, bringing you all the news from the Hindu and what is relevant from the civil services preparation. Take care and Jai Hind.